Hello, my name is Layton. I'm an intuitive and a mystic, and today we are going to be going over some exercises for mirror work. Exercises that are very foundational in my own life. They're something that have helped me tremendously, and I think that it's just an overlooked practice. I think it's a practice that more people should really be incorporating into their lives. Now, that being said, I have a part 1 to this kind of mini course that I'm doing where I talk about why this is so important. I talk about what we really plan to do here, which is to build coherence within the nervous system. I talk about somatic discernment. I explain certain things such as interoception and the body boundary. So I would prefer if you would go, if you have not watched that yet, and watch that video first. I have a little slideshow linked in the description that you can click on to kind of follow along. So at the very least, if you don't want to watch the entire video before getting into these exercises, please consider clicking on the slideshow and at least reading my descriptions about everything, because it will give you a little bit of a better understanding of what we are really getting into here. Now, before I say this, or before I get into this, this is not a paid ad or anything like that. This is a little announcement, though, for people who are fans of Rudolf Steiner or who are in the anthroposophy world. For my 33rd birthday, which was last month, I was looking everywhere online for a rose cross necklace. And I could not find one anywhere. I was very disappointed. So I reached out to my friend JJ, who does jewelry commissions, and she's extremely talented. And I had no idea if this was going to be in her realm of something that she could recreate. And she did. She's phenomenal. It looks absolutely, it's just beyond what I could have imagined. Honestly, I'm so happy with it. And I knew that other people were probably going to be looking for the same thing. And I was like, you could do something with this. People would probably be really interested in this. And so I posted about it. She got a couple more commissions. So I'm saying this to say she is offering them for a limited time. She also has one in, oh my gosh, it has these gorgeous garnets in the roses, and it's just really so beautiful. So whether you wanted a more traditional one or one that's a little bit more embellished, I will link her below in case anyone is interested, because like I said, it's only for a limited amount of time. So that is my little announcement, and now we can actually get into this. So let's start with using the self as a resource. So that's really what mirror work is all about. It's all about building coherence ultimately within every system within the body. However, what that actually means is that we become available to the self as a resource. So usually in the life of the average person, there is kind of this disconnect that we have with ourselves where we do not have the same kind of relationship with ourselves as we would have with our spouse or a family member or a very close friend. We tend to neglect ourselves a lot, and I think that's really sad. No one ever taught me when I was younger, and I'm sure you were not taught either, the importance of building this kind of relationship with myself. I knew that it was important to be self-aware. I knew that it was important to know what my values were. I knew it was important to take care of myself, but I was lacking coherence because I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to build resilience within my nervous system. And I didn't know how to actually use myself as a method or a resource for co-regulation. I had absolutely no idea that that was possible. So when things would happen with me, I could regulate myself to a certain point, and then anything beyond that, I needed some kind of mirror for. No pun intended, but very relevant here. So I would call up my mom, or I would call up a friend, or I would talk to whoever my partner was at the time. And there's nothing wrong with doing those things. However, ideally, we want to get to a point where we don't need to rely on the advice or co-regulation of other people. That exists as kind of an extra resource that is incredibly beautiful, because relationships are very beautiful. We want to be received by the people in our lives. We want them to have space for us, and we want to be able to offer that to them as well. But realistically, how much space can we really offer to other people when we don't have space for ourselves? How can we accept other people wherever they may be if we can't even accept ourselves having a negative emotion? You know what I mean? So the very beginning of this is understanding that as we are building coherence, the importance of that coherence is that it allows us to come out of survival states and to show up for ourselves in ways that maybe we didn't even know were possible. I have had serious attachment wounds in the past. I've been very open about this, how one of the ways that that manifested was through love addiction. And that did not necessarily have to just be romantic love addiction either, but it was any kind of connection where I felt very supported and validated, because that was something that I was highly lacking in childhood. So I never really had those experiences. So it was like a drug to me. And it was like, as I got older, when I would have dynamics that would make me feel validated and they would make me feel safe, because I did not know how to resource that within myself, I would make that person an idol that represented these unmet needs that I had, that I thought I could only get met through them. And that did not necessarily mean that I was always reaching out to this person to try and get that from them. Sometimes I was, and sometimes I wasn't. But it did mean that I was very painfully aware of that dynamic and painfully aware of the fact that that is how I felt. And so that is something that can feel very crippling. It can feel very isolating, because then you feel like a burden, or maybe you feel like you're using this other person when that's not your intention. And it left me in a place where I was afraid, even in my own romantic relationship, I was afraid to have sex, because I was thinking, oh gosh, is this like some love addiction thing where every time I have sex, I'm using it to validate my own worth? And so that was something I had to work through. I was afraid to receive emotional support for the exact same reason. Is this a normal level of emotional support, or am I using you as a crutch for the thing that I can't offer to myself? And so I began to isolate myself and become very avoidant and agoraphobic as a way of protecting myself. And that's because previously I was very anxiously attached. And so this is often what we do, is there's kind of this pendulum swing where we recognize something about ourselves, we attempt to correct it, but we overcorrect it, and we end up in the exact same place, but with a different manifestation. Mirror work is extremely potent because it offers us a way to build a very deep connection and relationship with the self that we can't necessarily build through something just like journaling or saying various affirmations, or maybe doing somatic meditations. All of these things are very important. And realistically, we need cohesiveness. We need wholeness, we need balance. So that is to say that if we are doing mirror work, but then we aren't eating right, and we're not sleeping, and we aren't setting boundaries in our life, all of these things, that's something that needs to be a goal that we start to set, where it's like, okay, I can do this practice, this is incredible, and I'm working towards helping myself. But at the same time, how can I work to create more balance in other areas of my life as well? Because if I only focus on this one thing and I'm neglecting myself in other areas, it kind of defeats the purpose. I hope that makes sense. That being said, when we are starting off with this, one of the very beginning exercises that we can do is becoming familiar with the body's needs. So we want to assess certain things. So, and there are a few beginner practices that we can do, one of which being developing the body boundary, which I actually do cover in part 1. But it's just essentially when we are feeling out the space around us and kind of mapping it out, and then through certain practices, allowing us to embody that space. What you can even do, and this is kind of taking things a step further, you can even, if you have a floor mirror, this would be ideal. You can even take tape or various objects or something. And so you can kind of map out, okay, this is my wingspan, this is the space that I take up. And then you can mark that space with various objects and practice expanding your natural body movements to fill that space more. Because the more restricted we are, the more closed we are, the more that we're, scrunching ourselves up, what we're saying to the body is it's not safe to be open. We're saying I'm closed off to this experience, closed off to this person, I'm closed off to this energy. When I am out and about, I have to make myself small. That is how I protect myself. But realistically, all we're doing is imprisoning ourselves. And so we want to begin by kind of mapping out a space. We don't want to impose on someone else's space. That is not the goal. So this is why we kind of create a map. We don't want to ignore someone else's physical body boundary and constantly be in their space. But we do want to be comfortable enough to be open. The nervous system, and I talk about this in my video on neuroalchemy, the nervous system responds, the body responds to the physical cues that we send. This is extremely important to understand because if I'm sending physical cues, it can be completely unconscious. Usually it is. And if I'm sending physical cues that I need to be restricted, what I'm saying to my nervous system is, this place is not safe. These people are not safe. Therefore, I am not safe. When in reality, maybe I don't feel comfortable in this place. Maybe I don't feel comfortable around these people. But does that actually mean that I'm not safe? Maybe not. Maybe I'm completely safe. And I need to be able to feel that safety within myself. So mapping the body boundary is part of that. And again, I go over that more in part 1. But what we're going to talk about now is kind of assessing where we are at. We can do this by practicing in the mirror with different statements. And you want to kind of assess whether or not I statements feel better to you or whether or not you statements feel better. And this can be kind of tricky because we are looking at the self. You want to look into your own left eye, the reflection of your left eye. And as you gaze into that reflection, you want to practice saying something. I have written down in my journal, I could ASMR this for a second. So you want to, I love ASMR. I think it's so regulating. You know who I watch is Osley ASMR. I love her. And she has these singing ones where she sounds like a siren and she's like pretending to do your makeup and singing in the background and whispering at the same time. And I fall asleep so quickly if I'm listening to that. So the difference between the I and you statements is that the I statements, generally when those resonate more with us, it's because we have more coherence. This maybe isn't going to be true for everyone, but I have seen this to be true. And when we resonate with the you statements more, it's because we have less coherence. Now, please do not categorize yourself as like the I statements are good, the you statements are bad. It has nothing to do with that. Realistically, we will always experience fluctuations within the nervous system. You can develop a certain amount of coherence and then have a very traumatic event happen that causes you to lose coherence and lose resilience because you didn't actually have the capacity for that experience. Therefore, you weren't able to recover the way that you would normally recover. So we don't want to look at it like that at all. This is just an assessment. It tells us where we are at. Wherever we are at is completely okay. Say it with me. Wherever I am is completely okay. This is not a race. This is not a competition. Life is not a competition. I don't have to be like this person. I don't have to be like that person. I don't have to show up any kind of way other than what is authentic to me. Okay? So here are some things that we can practice saying is you want to kind of look, and these are affirmations to build a relationship with yourself. They might feel silly at first. That is okay. I can promise you that eventually when you are consistent with this, it will start to feel a lot less awkward. It's awkward at first because we don't have a relationship with the self. It's awkward at first because we are encroaching on a certain level of intimacy that we have not yet developed. Maybe we don't even have that intimacy with other people. And so when we start to feel that intimacy, even just the act of gazing into your own eyes can feel deeply unsettling. And it can cause certain sensations to arise in the body that can feel like a threat. This is completely normal because the nervous system doesn't know the difference. And you may say, well, of course I know the difference, but between who I am and who another person is cognitively. But the nervous system does not operate that way. It operates on a completely different playing field. So when we are looking at ourselves in the mirror and gazing into our eyes, all the nervous system registers is, I am having this deeply intimate moment. Do I have the capacity for this level of intimacy? It's not registering, oh, this is intimacy between me, myself, and I, or this is intimacy between me and a stranger, or this is intimacy between me and someone else. The only way that it is able to navigate or kind of map out what that intimacy is like is in the reflection of how you feel about it. So if you feel uncomfortable because you don't have that level of intimacy with yourself yet, then the nervous system is going to respond to you as if you are a stranger. That is why we build this coherence. That is why we work on this relationship. And then as time goes by and you begin to develop a relationship with all parts of yourself, the adult you that is kind of the higher self, holds the higher perspective, has that integrated wisdom, the inner child, the parts of yourself that you have exiled because you have said, I don't want this. I'm going to bypass this. This is too negative. This is wrong. I don't resonate with this, so I'm just going to sweep it under the rug. And when that's not how that works. So we have these parts of ourselves that we actually abandon or exile. I have a video lecture where I go into this, and it's called The Forgotten Self, where I talk about the power of reclaiming those aspects of ourselves so that we can integrate them in a way that is so beautiful. We also have our protector parts. We have our inner critic. We have our inner teen, which is often so angry. And we just pretend that these aspects of us don't exist because it's easier that way. And so we end up being a stranger to ourselves, no matter how much we don't want to admit that. This helps us work on that. It helps us develop a deeper relationship with every aspect of the self. So you want to start off and say things to build a relationship. You are safe with me is something that I would start off with. You are safe with me. You can say, I am safe with me, or I am safe with myself as an alternative. And again, just look yourself into your left eye and see how those statements feel in your body. If you feel any kind of tightness in the chest, if you feel dissociated at all, if you feel uncomfortable, then that is a sign that you are going to maybe not yet have the capacity for that statement. If you feel uncomfortable with both I and you statements, then just begin with the you statements, but try to incorporate you statements that feel a little bit less loaded. I also say, I love you. Nothing you could do, nothing would ever cause me to abandon you. This is speaking directly to the inner child, because that is usually who comes forward first. We have this wounded inner child that we don't even know is kind of like at the control panel of the adult self that is facing day-to-day life. It's a lot like the movie Inside Out is a great representation of this. So you have this inner child that you're totally disconnected from, who is kind of pushing different buttons and moving different toggles throughout the day according to the level of abandonment and neglect that it is experiencing, that he or she is experiencing. You can also say, I will take care of you. Your feelings matter to me. You can write all of these down. I will write them down, and I'll have them on my website in the description for you to go and pull up easily. And I'll have some other follow along material to make this easier, so that if you watch this and then say, well, I don't remember what we talked about, don't worry, I'll have it all out there for you. I love and accept you in any state. So if it's difficult to do this with yourself at first, you can practice this a couple of times through the emotional freedom technique. It is also known as EFT. So there are certain parts of yourself that you will tap. And actually, this is going to look different depending on the practitioner that you choose if you research this yourself. And I will also have a little tapping map for you to look at, but this helps to kind of program this into your nervous system in a way that is a little bit less overwhelming. If the tapping overwhelms you more, forget about it. You know, this is individual. Every person is so different. So if I'm saying something that I have a huge disconnect with, such as I love and accept you in any state, or alternatively, I love and I accept myself in any state, I can I'm going to tuck this in because my hair keeps wanting to wrap itself up in it. Also, I made this hoodie for myself, and it says, say no to AI oracles and bot profits. I love being a walking billboard for weird things like this that will hopefully open up a conversation to talk about some topics that I think really, really matter. But I wasn't sure if that was going to show up or how that would show up. So I figured I would say that just in case anyone was wondering. But if I'm having a disconnect between myself and these words, then I can kind of tap and say, and you just do it for a couple of seconds in each place, I will take care of you. Your feelings matter to me. I love and accept you in any state. I will never leave you. And then you can also tap the collarbone. You can tap the side under the arm. You can do both sides at the same time. And so it kind of helps, it can help to kind of override those initial feelings of discomfort, not in the sense of ignoring them, but in the sense of programming this into your system in a way that's a little bit different. ultimately what you want to do is you want to give yourself what you need. So when we are little children, we have these intrinsic needs. When those needs go unmet, we begin to seek that out from other people. But realistically, when we're children, we need other people to teach us, to provide for us, to show us how to do these things ourselves, to co-regulate us, because we don't yet have the capacity to do that for ourselves. As we grow older, what should happen is that we should have had that mirrored to us in a healthy way in childhood, ideally, that causes us to build coherence within the nervous system, and therefore teaches us how to relate to ourselves in that way so that we can use ourselves as a resource in adulthood. But realistically, most of us did not have that experience at all. And so this is where we have to kind of learn to show up for ourselves, because it's not about not leaning on community. Community is very important, but we should be our own resource first. And it's not just a matter of leaning on God to have that connection. That is a huge part of it. But if we're leaning on God and we're not bringing the nervous system into it, and we don't understand how the nervous system operates, we don't understand that when we are in a survival state, the prefrontal cortex is pretty much completely offline, and that is our consciousness. That is our conscious awareness, I should say. And so when that's offline, everything else is subconscious programming. We need to understand that. And so we're living out of the programming, and most of that is programming from trauma, from pain, from our wounds. And we kind of just cycle in that state over and over and over again. So it's very important for us to develop this coherence so that we can actually start to move forward in life and become grounded. Another exercise that we can do is self-havening in the mirror. Now, this will automatically activate mirror neurons. What happens is when and I was even thinking about this the other day, some people are more sensitive to this than other people. I have something, it seems like a silly diagnosis, but I have a type of synesthesia that is called mirror touch synesthesia, which is essentially, I will be watching a movie and say someone is shot or stabbed or being operated on or something like that. I will feel that in my body as if it's happening to me. And I don't just mean emotionally, I mean the physical sensations are so unbearable. I also, while I'm having that experience, I'll get this very bizarre feeling like there's this electricity running up and down my legs, and it's a horrible feeling. So I have to look away if something comes up. The same can be said if I'm with someone and they injure themselves in front of me. I have a very difficult time with that. I apologize if you guys can hear my stomach. It's lunchtime. It is lunchtime. And this microphone tends to pick up on absolutely everything. But mirror touch synesthesia is really just something that all of us experience to an extent. It's just some of us are so sensitive in that regard that we experience it with the dial turned up all the way, and other people can be more desensitized to it. So what this really is that it's activating mirror neurons, and mirror neurons are highly, highly powerful. So even though this is something that causes me discomfort and makes me feel it's not something that I like to experience, it's interesting because also if I'm watching something and two people are in love or they're embracing one another or there's this very beautiful moment, I'm experiencing it so deeply as if it's real, as if it's my moment, and it's like my heart is glowing and encompassing my entire body in this overwhelming warmth. So this happens to all of us, just much more subtly. And it's because it's activating these mirror neurons that are recognizing that sensation, and then that sends certain messages to the nervous system. So self-havening is when you basically offer your body physical comfort. So this can be something like stroking the arm. I really like that one. Even as I started doing that now, that's very relaxing to me. Or you can even stroke the collarbone or the chest area. When I was a child, I had this very bad anxious tic. I didn't know that I was self-havening, and I took it a little too far, because I would have this giant scab over my collarbone because I would rub at it so aggressively when I was anxious. However, that was my attempt to self-regulate. And often we do things as an attempt to self-regulate, and we maybe don't realize that that's what we're doing. So self-harm is part of this. It is an attempt to self-regulate when you don't have any other resources. And basically there's this intense buildup of panic or pain or anxiety within the nervous system that desperately feels like it needs to be regulated or released somehow. And when we internalize our entire experience, we can end up taking things out on ourselves in a desperate attempt to break up whatever the experience is. So sometimes if someone is having a panic attack, people will suggest, they need to drink something really cold or eat something sour because it disrupts the pattern. And this basically is the same kind of understanding. Is we will do certain things to disrupt the pattern. However, there are positive things that we can do too. So we can, rub the arms, the collarbones, massage under the collarbones. You don't want to do anything too overstimulating, okay? So keep it light, not too overstimulating. You can brush your own hair, or, play with your own hair. Mine's doing something kind of crazy right now. You can touch your own face. It can help to touch yourself places where maybe you don't normally do so. So you could touch the soles of your feet, for example, or maybe stroke your shins or the fronts of your legs. It can help when it's something that does not get a lot of stimulation throughout the day, to kind of build that connection. Now, when we incorporate that in mirror work, we are doing this exact same thing within our own reflection. And so not only are we soothing and calming the nervous system, we're activating the parasympathetic nervous system, and this can increase vagal tone as well. But then we're activating mirror neurons at the exact same time that lead to a more cohesive sense of safety within the body. So that's another thing that we can do. And then another exercise is working with parts work, and I'm only going to give a few examples here. We'll get deeper into this later on, because everything I want to talk about here, I want it to be foundational. I want you to feel that you can safely engage in these exercises and practices. And we are getting into, the meat of some things, but we're also trying to ease into it, because if you've never had an experience before, and then all of a sudden you start integrating all of these things that you may or may not have the capacity for, that can end up being more dysregulating in the long run, which is exactly what we want to avoid. The goal is resilience within the nervous system. And while regulation is part of that, what we're trying to do is move away from the idea of, oh, I'm upset, I'm stressed, then I do this practice and I regulate my nervous system. Because so often what's really happening is a form of bypassing or abandonment or neglect that is dressed up as self-care. We see this so often within the New Age community, so often within the manifestation community as well. And it is extremely, extremely harmful. That is not going to actually build long-term stability. It's not going to add to our wholeness. It actually takes away from it. So when it comes to parts work, I recommend beginning with the inner child first, because the inner child tends to be the most vocal, and also the easiest to comfort, in the sense that it's kind of like we begin there with developing this ease and this softness. I used to have this practice, and speaking of ASMR, listening to ASMR was a huge part of that, where I would feel extremely overwhelmed by something that would happen. And in the beginning, I didn't have the inner resources that I have now. And so, oh my goodness, my stomach, it literally sounds like a dolphin, like flopping in and out of the ocean. I'm so sorry if you can hear that. That is actually crazy. It's probably too, like, me using all of these hand motions, and I'm just shaking my empty stomach all around over here. Feeling like you didn't know you were coming to SeaWorld today, but here we are. I wish I was better at video editing, because if you could hear it, then every time the sound made, I would just have like a little dolphin going across the screen. But what I would do is, when I was very overwhelmed in these different situations emotionally, I would put myself in a little timeout, not in a punishment way, but to give myself a breather. I would put on some ASMR, I would curl up underneath the blanket, and I would just hold myself. And I would speak to myself as if I was a little child. I have spoken about this so often in my videos. It probably sounds like a broken record at this point, but it works. And it's extremely potent. We develop this relationship with ourselves where we can overcome so many limiting beliefs. We can stretch ourselves so much further than we ever believed that we could, not by force, not by saying you got to get over it and get to work. No, it's by comfort. It's by love. It's by pulling these parts of ourselves that we had exiled back into ourselves. And the only way that we can do that is by showing up for the self and saying, I refuse. I absolutely refuse to continue to abandon you. So parts work is something that you can do in the sense where, we have different parts. We have the parts that we've exiled. We have the inner critic. We have the inner child. We have the protector part. We have the inner angry teen. We have all of these different parts. And what you can do is you can write out certain affirmations to that part, or you can write a letter to that part, and you can de-shame everything. You can thank them. So with your inner critic, for example, you can say, I understand that you think that I need to be, or that you need to be perfect in order for us to be safe, and that you have developed these criticisms as a way to keep us safe. Thank you. Thank you for all of these criticisms, because I know that it really just comes from you wanting to protect me. And what I'm going to tell you now is that we don't need those anymore. We can be safe without those. And you have done such a good job at trying to protect us. You've done such a good job at trying to keep us safe in these certain relationships or situations. And now we don't need to do things that way anymore. Or with the parts of yourself that you've exiled, writing an apology letter and saying, I'm so sorry that I abandoned you. I abandoned you the same way that mom and dad did. I abandoned you the same way that, your spouse or your ex-husband or ex-wife did. I did the exact same thing. When your teachers constantly picked on you in front of everyone and made you feel stupid, I joined in. I chimed in. I made you feel bad about your body just like grandma did, and I'm so deeply sorry for that. You did not deserve that. You did not deserve me saying those things to you. It was cruel. I never should have done that. I take responsibility for that now, and I am going to work to not do that to you anymore. So we need to rebuild these connections with these different parts of ourselves. And this requires consistency. This isn't a one-off thing. This is the kind of thing where you make a choice, and the choice is, I am not going to neglect myself anymore. I'm not going to rely on other people to give me external validation. I'm not going to rely on other people to regulate me or to constantly give me advice. It's okay to get that sometimes, but ultimately the goal is to have that within ourselves. That is the goal. So this needs to be something where we make a promise to ourselves to say, I am going to show up for you. It's kind of like setting a date with a friend. So I can have this thing where my inner child knows that at 7 p.m. every night this week, we are going to have a get together, and I am going to show up for her and find out what she needs. And I am going to meet those needs in whatever way possible, in whatever way that I can. Or my protector part knows, that when certain things come up, I'm going to remove myself from the situation. We're going to have a little conversation. And I don't mean this in a dissociative way. I don't mean this in a way where we see these parts of ourselves as separate from us. They're not. They're not. That's the opposite of what we want to do. They're an aspect, okay? It's not this outside persona. And I used to have dissociative identity disorder. I know that this is controversial. It really does not matter what the label is. But the truth of the matter is that I had experienced such extensive trauma that I had split. So for me, it was like each one of these parts was extremely separate from me. And the way that I had to integrate that and the way that I recovered from that was to make a choice and say, I am not going to dissociate anymore. I may not be able to control that at all times, but what I can do is not allow it to get any worse. And what I can do is find ways to support my nervous system, find ways to support my body, build resilience within my nervous system so that I have the capacity for these things that before felt so dangerous and so unsafe, to the point where I could not be present for pretty much anything. I wasn't present for anything. I wasn't present for years. So this is about healing that. And I fully believe that if someone has any kind of dissociative spectrum disorder, that, this is different than, it can be more complicated if you've had a head injury or something like that, but that still does not mean that you're completely written off. You're not. There are things that can be done to heal that and to recover that. And this is why studying medical neurology was huge for me and very foundational in my somatic experience, because it gave me an understanding of things that I just didn't have before, that helped me to kind of tie all of this stuff together. That's why I got into mirror work, because it was very foundational for me. So that being said, when we are extremely dissociated from those parts of ourselves, all the more reason to do this and to understand that this is not separate. This is me. It just doesn't feel like me because I'm so fragmented right now in this traumatized state. I never in a million years, thought that I could get from how fragmented I was, where I had pretty much no short-term memory whatsoever because I couldn't be present. And it was very terrifying for me. The episodes that I had, this is not, TikTok DID stuff. This was absolutely terrifying. The episodes that I had were so scary and surreal. And I was so disconnected from myself that I would have these episodes where it was like my body would get so overheated and my voice would start to sound like a robot voice to me, and I couldn't stay present in my body, and I would look at my hands and they don't look like my hands, and I can't connect to my reflection in the mirror, and everything sounds extremely far away, and my ears are ringing, and I just feel sick to my stomach and terrified, and it was the most horrific experience ever. And I have not had any kind of experience like that in years because of slowly incorporating these things, slowly building this relationship with myself. We can recover from things that seem impossible. And it starts with meeting the needs that were never met for us and giving ourselves the things that we were never given. That is extremely important. So if you have any questions about this, or this is something that you're struggling with, or you need help navigating this at all, please don't hesitate to leave a comment, or you can shoot me an email or something like that, because I know how difficult it is. Oh my goodness, the dolphin is going to town. So we should probably end this here, because I need to give myself what I need, which is lunch. And I thank you so much for being here with me. I really enjoy this tremendously. Like I said, if there's anything that you need clarification on, then feel free to ask me, and we are going to continue to get deeper into this, but we want to ease into it. This can be a lot for some people. So feel free to only move as quickly as the slowest part of yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. It does not mean that you're behind. It means that you're right on time, actually. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to do. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. And I love you guys so much. Have a good one.